Hello, everybody. My name is Ian, and welcome to the premiere episode of the Myths in the Big City podcast. The pilot, if you will. Doing a podcast has always been something I've really wanted to do, and it feels really exciting to finally press record and get the ball rolling. If you are listening and you want to be a part of this journey, hit subscribe. I think that would be really, really awesome. I don't think this journey would be as exciting on my own. So I cordially invite you to listen in and be a part of this journey because I'm having fun and I think you should have fun too. Make sure to leave a comment. I'll be sure to read them all and enjoy the very first episode of the Myths in the Big City podcast. And we're here. This is the podcast. What is this podcast? This podcast, I should call it a project. It's really about two things. It's about myth, and it's about the world we live in today. My hope is that I can somehow kind of bring the two together in a way that's not too dense or complicated. I remember a few years back, I stumbled upon a really cool podcast about Greek mythology. And the first episode started with the basic stuff, like Cronus devouring his children and the way his children defeated the first Titans and all that. And it sounds cool, and I found myself getting kind of bored and a little overwhelmed by the sheer number of gods and the names and the places. I actually just gave up on the podcast because I couldn't do it. I couldn't drive to work and process all of these names. You have Cronus, and you have Gaia, and you have Zeus and Apollo and all of these people, and this person's the son of this person, and so on and so forth. Or I should say that this god is the son of that god, and so on and so forth. But the sheer density of all of these names probably is able to be, it's probably digestible to those who really, really sink their teeth into it. And I'm sure some that are listening to this podcast because it's about mythology, I'm sure many of you have done that. And I have done that, especially when I was sort of like inching my way through college. I was forced to do that. But I feel like a lot of that is developed in an organic way. The ancient Greeks, right? The ones that were living day by day and believing these gods and worshiping these gods, they never sat down and just thought, okay, I'm just going to just plow my way through all of these books, because they grew up listening to these stories from their parents and their grandparents, and these stories would explain the world that they lived in. So this podcast is sort of my attempt to do just that. So it's to sort of give you an organic experience where I slowly give you these stories and break them apart. So this is what I'm going to do. Each podcast will focus on one myth. It might be Greek. It might be Viking. It might be Persian or French or Scottish. It might be Chinese. It might even come from fantasy books or science fiction sagas. But it will be one myth per podcast. And then I will explore that myth, what it means to us, and most importantly, what it means to us in the 21st century, right? What it means to us now, because when we look at our culture and we look at the way our culture was put together, a lot of times myths are at the foundation of that. And when we unpack it, it not only serves as a really cool story, but it really lets us sort of pull the wool over all of the confusion of this world and help us navigate it. So I hope I can do that. Okay, what do I mean by myth? Because this is the first episode, and obviously this is something that we need to agree on, right? What do I mean by myth? We all have different interpretations. Some people go the ultra psychological route. I'm not going to do that. I'd like to, because I'm a big fan of Joseph Campbell, and I think Jordan Peterson had a series on myth. Some people have seen that. I think that that's interesting, but I don't want to get too dense and academic. This is not exactly the kind of like academic highbrow experience that I want to go through. I mean, I think for the background footage, I'm going to probably use like gaming footage, possibly some, what's the word? Like stock footage and things like that. So this is like, don't expect this to be like a university class. There's not going to be a test on any of this. This is literally for fun. But it's also like a mechanism to help sort of guide us through this weird world. But when I answer the question of what is a myth, what is myth itself, this is my take. Imagine a civilization of seafaring people who have been around for centuries. Now imagine that they noticed that the islands they sailed between are shaped like various beings. Humans in certain positions, monsters, mythical creatures, etc. And the earliest members of this seafaring society told stories about these beings as a way to explain their harvests, daily routines, and religious beliefs. Those foundational stories are what I refer to as myth. But we also have to look at the harvests, the daily routines, and the religious beliefs themselves. So think of it as two layers of a cake. There is the mythological layer being the imagined or exaggerated beings, and a reality layer, or the real world, that is deeply shaped by that myth. There's a really cool, popular video game that's been out for a few years. Maybe you heard of it. It's called Elden Ring. And you may have heard of it. It's from Software, the studio that brought us games like Dark Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne. Now, the visionary behind these games is a guy named Hidetaka Miyazaki. The cool thing about Elden Ring in particular is that the game hired George R.R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, to write the background mythology for the story. And he wrote about the tensions between various gods and demigods and the shattering of the Elden Ring, which sets up the game that you actually play. The physical events you play through are set thousands of years after the background story that George R.R. Martin composed and when that story took place. That story, the story you actually play, was composed by Miyazaki and his team. Now, the two men, Hidetaka Miyazaki and George R.R. Martin, never actually met in real life, and yet together they wrote the most epic game story ever. This is because there was a divide between the myth and the living reality of the game, just like the relationship between our world and the world of mythology. And that, to me, is really, really cool. Because there's you can expand on that, right? So there's the relationship, to use the Greeks again, right? So there's the relationship that the Greeks had to their mythology. There's also the relationship that we have to the Greeks and the Greeks to their mythology. And it all sort of interconnects at some point. And then there's more foreign mythologies. I was talking about like the Persians and things like that. It's really interesting how it all kind of comes together in this incredibly weird, interconnected way. And I hope that we can unpack a lot of that on this show, because that's really the most exciting part about the mythology. That we could trace our cultural lineage in some ways to the Greeks, even if you have no Greek blood or European blood or any of the blood of the people that compose these stories. We're all connected to the values that they kind of just shot out, right? So yeah, I definitely hope that this show, this podcast, can explore some of that. This is just the first episode. So this episode's story will be, and I'm really excited to do this, the first story we're going to cover in this is going to be the Sword of Damocles from ancient Greece. So that's really cool. Ancient Greece is since the mythology is just so fleshed out and we have so much evidence of it, I think that's a great place to start. I'm so stoked about this. Now, before I even tell you the story of the Sword of Damocles, we have to give a shout out to Cicero, the famous Roman thinker and orator. We actually wouldn't even know this story had he not preserved it. So we give a warm posthumous thank you to you, Cicero. Thank you so much for keeping this story alive. Okay, so there is a king named Dionysius who rules a place called Syracuse. None of this is really important. Just know that there is a king named Dionysius. Now, King Dionysius has, let's call him an advisor, named Damocles. Damocles is always showering the king with compliments and talking about the great job that he's doing. One day, Dionysius has a really interesting idea, Maybe he could trade places with Damocles so that Damocles could experience what it really feels like to be king. Now, our boy Damocles doesn't hesitate, and he switches, and he loves it. He enjoys being waited on by hand servants. He enjoys the food, the perks, the wonders of being a king. Now, who wouldn't, right? But then he notices something pretty frightening and kind of weird. There is an enormous sword hanging over his head, and that sword is suspended only by a single horsehair. And that's pretty much the story. Like if you want to push pause and just let that story sink in for a second, I'd forgive you. Obviously, this is a story about anxiety, the anxiety of serving such an important role. When you are an outsider, you do not see the stakes. I think that's really what the heart of this story is. This is a helpful lesson in the world of Instagram and social media. We so easily envy all of the influencers who quote unquote make it, but we are totally oblivious to the hours that go into making it online. And of course, the stress of saying something wrong. This is by no means a political podcast, but we all know just how sensitive the web can be. It just takes one off-color remark and you can lose literally everything, more than everything. I remember this story a lot. When I get the urge to just bash someone in a place of high office, I have a habit of saying to myself, I don't have that sword of Damocles. You criticize a politician, you might need to think, I don't have that sword of Damocles hanging over my head. I want to close, though, with this statement of gratitude because we are quite lucky to have this myth, this story. I talked about how Cicero mentioned it, and had he not, we most likely would have never seen this legend, never experienced it. So, of course, it opens your eyes to all of the stories that have indeed been lost. But this is just one more lesson here. Be grateful, be curious, and keep learning about myths. This has been Ian, and I invite you cordially, again, I love that word cordially. I cordially invite you to leave a comment. What myth would you like to hear next? I'm willing to listen to what you like. So let me know what you want to hear. I'll research it. I'll talk about it. I'll connect it to the real world. Help us navigate this weird world. Make sure that you subscribe, my friends, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much.